All right, so we're diving into Max Holloway's world today with that Joe Rogan Experience MMA show interview.
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to be good when Max Holloway gets on the mic.
Always a good time.
But we're talking about that knockout that everybody's going crazy for. Some
Yeah.
real talk about his fighting style and even some rule changes that'll have you wondering if Max is trying to invent a whole new sport.
Well, it wouldn't be a Max Holloway interview without a little bit of chaos, right? Not at all. Got to keep things interesting.
But let's start with the reason why everyone clicked on this deep dive in the first place.
Yuck.
That knockout at UFC 300.
Oh, man.
I mean, is it even a question at this point?
It's up there.
Is that the greatest knockout of all time?
It's definitely up there. And you know what makes it even wilder? Max was the underdog going into this fight.
Oh, really?
Everyone and their grandma thought Gaethje was going to turn it into a brawl.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Remember those odds?
Yeah.
4-1 underdog right before that knockout?
Exactly.
Oh.
So you've got this incredible pressure cooker.
Yeah.
UFC 300, everyone expecting a slugfest. And Max just completely flips the script.
Yeah.
He stays calm, picks his shots, and then boom,
Right.
delivers that perfect overhand. Right? Like, it was nothing.
It was beautiful. I watched it live and my jaw was on the floor.
I was speechless for once.
Even Joe Rogan was speechless.
I know, that's rare.
For 5 seconds anyway.
Yeah, right.
But here's the thing, and this is what really struck me during this interview. Max isn't just a brawler.
Right.
He's incredibly strategic.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, this wasn't just luck. This was calculated precision. There's a moment in the fight, right before the knockout, where Gaethje's clearly hurt and starts swinging wildly,
Yeah.
trying to bait Max into a brawl.
I remember that. He was stumbling back towards the cage, just throwing haymakers.
And what does Max do?
I'm on the edge of my seat here.
He doesn't take the bait.
Oh, man.
He stays patient, waits for the perfect opening, and then bam,
Tell me it's the knockout blow.
lands that knockout blow.
Yeah.
That, my friend, is fight IQ in action.
See?
That's what separates the good from the great.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
It's like chess, but with punches instead of pawns.
I like that.
And speaking of unexpected strategies, did you catch that part where Max talks about learning some of his moves from video games?
You know, I did.
Come on.
That's classic Max right there.
Of course.
Finding an edge in the most unexpected places. But when you really think about it, it's not as crazy as it sounds.
Okay, break it down for us. How does a UFC fighter use video games to train?
All right, so think about it this way.
Okay.
Video games require incredible hand-eye coordination, timing, and anticipation.
Right. Especially the fighting games.
Exactly.
You have to learn combos, counter moves, when to block, when to strike.
And those skills translate surprisingly well to real-life combat.
Really?
Yeah. When Max is playing those games, he's essentially training his brain and body to react instinctively to different scenarios.
So he's basically downloading fighting techniques like Neo in The Matrix.
It might sound futuristic, but the principles are the same.
Wow.
Athletes have been using visualization techniques for decades. Max is just taking it to the digital realm. And he even admitted that he studied Joe Rogan's spinning back kick from years ago, way before he joined the UFC.
You're kidding? He actually learned a move from watching Joe Rogan?
Oh, it gets even better. Remember that spinning back kick knockout he used on Dustin Poirier?
Are you serious? He got that from a video game?
He didn't say.
Which one? Asking for a friend?
Honestly, I kind of hope he never reveals his secrets.
You're right.
But the point is, Max is pulling inspiration from everywhere.
Yep.
Even places that most fighters wouldn't think to look.
Wild. It really makes you wonder what other unconventional training methods are out there. But before we get too far off track, let's get back to Max's interview. He didn't just talk about video games, right?
Oh, no.
He had some pretty strong opinions about the rules of MMA.
Oh, we did. And that's where things get really interesting.
So we've got Max Holloway, video game warrior, potential rule breaker.
Right.
Where do these real changes come in? What's he looking to shake up?
Well, he and Joe really went down the rabbit hole on this one, specifically the rules Max would change if he were running the UFC.
Dang, Max Holloway has a nice ring to it, doesn't it?
I like it.
But seriously, which rules caught his attention?
He had some strong opinions on a few things. The ban on 12-6 elbows, knees to a grounded opponent, even removing the cage altogether.
Okay, whoa, slow down. Let's unpack those one at a time for anyone who hasn't listened to the whole interview. What's the deal with the 12-6 elbow?
So for those who don't know, a 12-6 elbow is basically when you bring your elbow straight down on an opponent like you're smashing a clock at 12-0.
Okay, right.
It's banned in the UFC because it's considered too dangerous. But Max makes a really interesting point. He argues that it's no more dangerous than a regular elbow strike, just with a different angle.
Didn't he actually demonstrate it on Joe?
He did.
I remember thinking, is that allowed
Yeah.
on the podcast?
Right? Like, how is a 3 o'clock elbow somehow more humane than a 12 o'clock one?
Right. It seems kind of arbitrary when you put it like that.
It's the same result.
Okay, so what about knees to a grounded opponent? That's a hot topic in MMA.
Definitely. And Max's take is super interesting. He believes that banning knees to a grounded opponent actually makes the sport less realistic and potentially more dangerous.
How? So, help me understand this.
Think about it. In a real fight, there are no rules about when and where you can attack.
Right.
Right? So by creating this artificial safe zone, when a fighter is grounded, you might be lulling them into a false sense of security.
So they might be less likely to defend themselves properly because they assume a knee is off the table.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Let their guard down and then bam.
They get caught with a surprise strike when they least expect it.
Exactly.
Wow, I never thought about it that way.
Yeah.
It's like that old saying, rules are made to be broken. Or, in this case, maybe questioned.
Exactly. And that brings us to the most radical rule change of all.
Okay.
Removing the cage.
Okay, now that one did make me do a double take. I mean, it's called the octagon for a reason.
I know, right? But Match Ever, the innovator, believes that removing the cage would lead to more dynamic, fluid fights.
So instead of those grinding battles against the fence, we'd see more open mat exchanges.
Absolutely.
That would definitely change the game.
For sure. Fighters would have to rely more on their footwork, their takedown defense, their ability to control the distance and pace of the fight. It would be a whole new level of strategy.
I have to admit, a cageless UFC sounds absolutely wild, but also kind of amazing.
Right.
It would be like watching a completely different sport.
Totally. And I think that's what makes this part of the interview so fascinating. Max isn't just complaining about the rules.
Yeah.
He's using them as a springboard to reimagine the sport.
It's like he's saying, okay, these rules exist, but what if we push the boundaries even further?
Exactly. It's about constantly evolving, challenging assumptions, and making MMA as authentic and exciting as it can be.
And speaking of pushing boundaries, we have to talk about that curveball Max threw about how rounds should start.
Oh, you mean his idea about starting each round in the exact same position as the last one ended?
Yes,
Yeah.
that blew my mind.
Yeah.
It makes perfect sense when you think about it. A real fight doesn't just magically reset every 5 minutes.
Right? It would completely change the dynamic of the fight. Imagine the strategy involved.
Oh, man.
Like those last-minute takedowns wouldn't carry nearly as much weight. You'd see fighters battling tooth and nail to maintain a dominant position as the clock winds down because they know they're not starting from zero in the next round.
It's like Max is proposing a whole new level of combat sports. Blessed MMA has a nice ring to it, don't you think?
Only Max could pull that off. But speaking of Max and his unique approach, it's clear that this whole options mentality extends beyond the octagon.
You're right. This interview really highlighted how intentional Max is about his career, both inside and outside of fighting. He talked a lot about keeping his options open.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he is. And that's what's so smart about his approach. It's not just about being a great fighter. It's about building a legacy that lasts. You see it in everything he does. The Blessed Brew, the streaming channel, even hinting at a podcast.
Don't forget his signature whiskey.
Oh, yeah.
He's definitely building an empire, and he's doing it his way.
Exactly. And that, my friend, is a true champion's mindset.
And speaking of long games, this whole conversation about rule changes got me thinking, what would happen if the UFC actually implemented some of Max's ideas?
Oh, man.
What if Blessed MMA became a reality?
I mean, on the one hand, you have the tradition of the sport, the established rules and judging criteria.
Right, like those 10-second breaks between rounds, the weight classes, the fouls, all of that creates a level playing field.
Right. But then you have Max, this visionary, who's not afraid to challenge the status quo, to ask, what if we did things differently?
And that's what I love about this interview. It's not just about Max Holloway the fighter. It's about Max Holloway the thinker, the innovator.
Absolutely. He's forcing us to think outside the octagon, to question our assumptions about the sport. And honestly, that kind of open-mindedness is refreshing.
It really is. And you know what else is refreshing? Max's attitude.
What's that?
He's so positive, so resilient. Even when he's talking about potentially career-ending injuries, he still has this incredible optimism.
He does, and that energy is contagious. It's one of the reasons people are so drawn to him.
For sure. He's the kind of guy you just want to root for, you know?
Yeah.
Win or lose, he's always staying true to himself, always spreading that blessed mentality.
He really is. And I think that's a powerful message for all of us, regardless of whether we're stepping into the octagon or just facing our own daily challenges. It's about finding that inner strength, that unwavering belief in yourself, even when things get tough.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Max's journey is a testament to hard work, perseverance, and the power of a positive mindset. It's proof that you can achieve amazing things when you're willing to push boundaries, Challenge conventions and never ever give up on your dreams.
And who knows? Maybe one day we'll all be watching Blessed MMA, thanks to Max Holloway's rule-breaking vision.
And wouldn't that be something? So there you have it, folks, our deep dive into the mind of Max Holloway. We covered a lot of ground today, from knockout analysis and video game training to rule changes and career philosophies.
And through it all, we got a glimpse into what makes Max such a unique and inspiring figure in the world of MMA.
He's more than just a fighter. He's a thinker, an innovator, and a true original. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm left with one final thought. If you could change one rule in MMA, what would it be and why? Let us know.